Welcome back, weary travelers. Join us as we sit closer to the crackling hearth fire. Let the orange glow flicker over your eyes and your mug of ale warm you. For tonight I will tell you not of grand kings and queens alone, but of the thousand tiny miseries and unlikely wonders of life in the medieval world, from the filth of peasant streets to the dark brilliance of monastic libraries. From blood-soaked battlefields to whispered prayers in candlelit chapels. The only illumination comes from hearth fires, candles, rushlights dipped in tallow, or the moon itself. Darkness was not a time of peace, but of fear. Wolves howled beyond the palisades. Outlaws and desperate men haunted lonely roads. Parents warned children not just of monsters, but of the very real danger of getting lost in blackness so complete that even your own hands vanished before your eyes. Even in towns, curfew bells rang to tell people to bank their fires and stay indoors. In many places, being caught out after curfew was grounds for suspicion. Watchmen patrolled with lanterns and bills, polearms in hand. But there was a strange beauty to these nights. The sky was unimaginably clear. No light pollution dulled the stars. Astronomers charted constellations, travelers navigated by the moon. Grab your rations indeed, because medieval food was far from the bland gruel you might imagine. Peasants lived largely on bread, pottage, a kind of vegetable stew, ale and cheese, leeks, beans, peas, sometimes a bit of pork fat if they were lucky. The wealthy enjoyed elaborate meals, roast swan, spiced wines, intricate pies. Spices like cinnamon and pepper were costly status symbols. Medieval banquets weren't just about food. Dishes were shaped like castles, birds were re-feathered after cooking for dramatic effect, and interludes of song and poetry entertained guests. Now let's wander the muddy streets of a market town. You might think medieval people didn't mind filth, but they complained constantly about it. In England, for example, royal proclamations outlawed throwing dung and offal into the street. But people did it anyway. Gutters ran with brown slurries. Chamber pots were dumped from upper windows with shouts of "Gardyloo!" a warning in parts of Scotland and England. Yet these towns were lively. Bell ringers marked the hours, blacksmiths hammered iron at their forges, merchants hawked their goods, and the scents were a strange mix of baked bread, fresh herbs, horse manure, and human sweat. Despite the stench, there was colour and life, red and blue wools, green-dyed tunics, jewel-bright illuminations on parchment, and the gold leaf of church altars. This age was also defined by sickness. Medieval medicine was a fascinating mix of observation, ancient learning, and utter guesswork. Physicians read Galen and Hippocrates. They believed illness was caused by an imbalance in the four humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. A pale complexion. Perhaps phlegm was ascendant, so they prescribed hot, dry foods. Yet some treatments worked despite the theory. Herbalists knew willow bark reduced pain. We now know it contains salicylic acid. Garlic and onions had mild antibiotic properties. Monastic infirmaries kept careful records of remedies. Then the Black Death arrived in 1347. Imagine whole villages dying. Corpses piled up faster than they could be buried. Fear broke social bonds. Even priests and doctors sometimes fled. But in many places, care continued in horrifyingly brave fashion. People nursed their kin knowing they might catch the same disease. The mortality was staggering. One estimate says Europe lost a third to half of its population. Yet after the plague, wages for peasants rose. Labor was scarce, so workers could demand better terms. Revolts broke out when lords tried to freeze wages. The plague helped destroy serfdom in many places, not out of kindness, but cold economic reality. The medieval world was profoundly religious. Even the poorest peasant might save for a pilgrimage to a local shrine. Cathedrals rose like mountains of stone, filled with stained glass that lit the gloom like jewels. But faith was laced with fear. Demons and witches haunted imaginations. Priests warned of hellfire. Apocalypse seemed always just around the corner, made more believable by war, famine, and plague. Yet the church also offered stability. It kept records, taught reading in Latin, offered charity, ran hospitals. It unified Europe under a shared spiritual culture. Monasteries were centers of learning, preserving texts from Greece and Rome, and producing beautiful illuminated manuscripts. Let's leave town and enter the world of the knight. It wasn't just fighting skill that made a knight, it was status. Boys sent to train as pages at 7 learned courtly manners, Latin prayers, swordplay. At 14, as squires, they served knights directly, polishing armor, learning to fight in earnest. At 21, they might be dubbed knights themselves. But war was not glorious. After battles, looting was common, and ransoming captured nobles was big business. Yet the knightly ideal of chivalry held power. Knights swore oaths to protect the weak, though they often failed, to serve God, to honor their lords. Stone battlements loom over narrow streets. Below houses cluster like crooked teeth. Smoke drifts from hundreds of chimneys. Bells toll from church towers. Merchants cry their wares in crowded squares. Fish, cheese, cloth, spices from distant lands. Carters curse as they maneuver heavy loads through throngs of people. Beggars hold out bowls, mumbling blessings or curses. The city is alive and dangerous. Thieves work in crowded markets, knives snipping purses from belts. Gangs of apprentices brawl with rivals in alleys. Brothels do brisk business behind shuttered windows. Taverns ring with laughter, arguments, drunken songs. Watchmen patrol, lanterns swinging, but the darkness belongs to the bold. Everything has a price. Markets are regulated, watched by guild officers and city officials. Weights and measures are checked carefully. Cheating is punished with fines or worse stocks in the square, shame before neighbors. Yet trade is the lifeblood of the city. Goods arrive by river and road. Cloth from Flanders. Wine from sunny vineyards far to the south. Coins change hands. Credit is offered. Debts are written in cramped ledgers. Some merchants grow rich enough to rival lords. They build tall houses of timber and stone, hire guards, marry daughters to impoverished nobles, buying prestige with silver. But prosperity breeds resentment. Councils are elected, though only by the wealthiest citizens. These councils tax, judge disputes, maintain walls and gates. They also feud endlessly. Factions split over guild interests. Blood spills in streets when rival parties clash. City politics is no less vicious than a royal court. And outside the walls, peasants watch with mixed envy and hatred. To them, the city is a place of freedom, but also greed, sin, corruption. Some run away to join its crowds. If a man lives in a city for a year and a day, say the charters, he is free. But freedom is harsh. An unskilled man may starve or be pressed into crime. A woman without kin may find no work but selling herself. Yet still they come, for the chance. Above all this towers the church. Cathedrals cast shadows over slums. Bishops rule lands like lords. Cathedral schools teach sons of merchants and nobles alike. Monasteries dot the outskirts with fields worked by lay brothers. Hospitals care for the sick so long as they can be saved. The dying are given last rites and comfort. Leper houses stand beyond city walls. Their inmates ring bells as they beg, warning others to stay back. In times of plague, fear consumes all. Priests walk streets with incense, chanting litanies. Doctors in long robes and beaked masks carry posies of herbs, hoping to ward off miasma. Bells toll for the dead at all hours. Burials are hurried, mass graves dug. Neighbors turn on each other in terror. Some blame the sins of the people. Some blame foreigners. Rumors spread that Jews poisoned wells. Pogroms follow families massacred, communities burned. And when the plague passes, life resumes. Children are born, but the memory lingers. Soldiers return from campaigns with scars, loot, and horror in their eyes. They tell of Saracen archers whose arrows blot the sun, of burning cities, of kings who broke faith. Minstrels weave these tales into songs, half truth, half wonder. Yet even in war there is honor at least, so say the knights. They follow codes of chivalry, pledging to protect the weak, to honor ladies, to serve God. But in practice, many see only golden glory. They ransom captive lords for fortunes. They sack towns, slaughter those who cannot pay. They boast of deeds done in God's name. Still, not all are villains. Some knights truly believe in their oaths. They sponsor churches, defend widows from bandits. They train from childhood, learning to ride, to fight with sword and lance. Their bodies bear scars of tourneys and war alike. When there is no war, they grow restless. They hold tournaments to test skill. Great fields are enclosed with barriers. Pavilions flutter with banners. Crowds gather. Trumpets sound. Knights charge, lances splintering. They fight for prizes, for glory, for the favor of noble ladies who watch from stands. Feasts follow with music, dancing, drinking until dawn. Meanwhile, in humble villages, life is much the same as it has always been. Children are born in the same huts their grandparents built. Fields are plowed with the same oxen. Priests teach the same prayers. Yet small changes arrive. These quiet revolutions transform the land slowly but surely. Population grows. Kings grow richer, stronger. But the peace is fragile. Wars break out over claims, insults, alliances. Knights gather under banners. Armies burn fields, slaughter livestock, starve entire regions. Sieges starve out cities. Catapults hurl rocks, fire, disease-ridden carcasses over walls. Battering rams thunder at gates, and all the while the seasons turn. Spring with planting, summer with long days of work, autumn with harvest and hope, winter with hunger and fear. At night, families gather around small fires. They tell stories to keep the dark at bay, of heroes who slew dragons, of distant lands where wonders await. Children listen wide-eyed, knowing that tomorrow means more labor, more risk. But for now they dream. They hold each other close against the cold. They whisper prayers. They wait for dawn. For all the hardship, all the hunger, all the fear people endured, they laughed. Oh yes, laughter existed even in those dark days. Jesters in courts made noble lords roar with mirth, tumbling, juggling, jesting at danger. In taverns, songs were sung with bawdy verses that made even stern priests chuckle when no one was listening. Children played with hoops, dolls carved from wood, pretend swords made from sticks. They chased chickens, splashed in streams, and whispered secrets under haylofts. They passed notes written on scraps of parchment, and some risked everything to be together. Even amidst toil and war, people carved out moments of joy, dancing on feast days, shoes thudding on packed earth, fiddles singing, hands clapping in time. Weddings lasted for days, with ale flowing like rivers and voices raised in song until the stars faded. But the world was changing. Slowly. Inevitably. The printing press would come, centuries later, breaking the monopoly of the scribe. Gunpowder would roar on battlefields, changing the nature of war. Serfdom would wither as cities grew. The Black Death, terrible as it was, would reshape society. With fewer mouths to feed, wages rose. Lords found themselves short of workers. Some peasants claimed abandoned land. Others demanded more freedom. Monarchs centralized power, raising armies and taxes. The old feudal world cracked and reformed. Ideas crossed borders with merchants, scholars, and pilgrims. Knowledge flowed from the Arab world: medicine, astronomy, mathematics. Monasteries translated ancient texts, and libraries grew heavy with parchment and vellum. People began to question, what is truth? What is justice? What lies beyond this life? The Renaissance loomed, its dawn faint but undeniable. The Middle Ages, long and often misunderstood, were not just darkness. They were the soil from which the modern world would grow. Rough, thorny, and full of shadow, but fertile all the same. And so the candle gutters low. The tale nears its end. The castle towers recede into the mists. The fields fall silent under the moon. The monks close their books for the night. The knights sheathe their swords. The merchants tally their coins one last time. In the later Middle Ages, new ideas bloomed. Towns grew wealthy on trade. Merchants sponsored art and learning. Universities taught not just theology, but law and medicine. Gunpowder began to change warfare. Cannons battered down castle walls. Longbows and crossbows threatened heavily armored knights. In Florence, artists like Giotto experimented with perspective. In Paris, scholars argued over Aristotle. In England, Chaucer wrote in English rather than French or Latin. By the 15th century, the Middle Ages were ending, but they left us with legends, ruins, words, laws, and a world forever changed. So for now, dear acquaintances, as your ale grows warm in your hand and the fire sinks to embers, you may let the night consume you. Perhaps you will see flickering torchlight on a castle wall, or hear the muttered prayers of a peasant woman tending a sick child, or feel the weight of armor as you ride to battle, as we'll soon meet again.